Hi, welcome everyone to the Community Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So we're just going to do introductions later. So firstly, housekeeping. So fire alarm. Fire practice is not expected. If the alarm sounds, can all present leave the building as quickly as possible by the nearest exit. The designated assembly point is the public square in front of CAS beyond the fountain, away from the civic office. No roll call will be undertaken. Thank you. If there is anybody with mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs where the emergency evacuation lift is located, and use the intercom situated to the left-hand side of the lift doors to call for assistance. Mobile phones. In addition, I would like to ask everyone to ensure that your mobile phone is switched to silent mode. This meeting will also be audio visually recorded and will be available to view on the Council's website and YouTube channel. Can I ask all those present to use their microphones to ensure the audio can be captured? And any members of the public, well, there's no members of the public, but any of them entering the council chambers are accepting that their images will be retained and broadcast by the council. As I say, there's no members of the public present, so skip that bit. So please note that you have to observe COVID safety protocols. If you leave the meeting, can I ask you to sanitize your desk, consoles and microphones with the wipes before you leave? And if you do not need to wear a mask while you are seated, however, if you could wear one when moving around the chamber. So, have we got any apologies for absence? And I've got Councillor Hutchinson. Is there anyone else, Chris?
No, Chair, just Councillor Hutchinson.
Fantastic. So, there's no excluded, there's no parts of the meeting where the press and public have to be excluded. So, is there any declarations of interest? No? Okay, so can we accept the minutes of the Community Environment Overview and Scrutiny held on the 11th of October as a true and accurate record? Can I propose it? No. Seconder? All agreed? Fantastic. Okay, got no public statements today. So we'll move on to item agenda 6. So that's the community safety strategy, and that's on pages 9 to 70 of the agenda. So can we have the officers introduce themselves, please?
Afternoon everyone, I'm Rachel Long. I'm the Crime and Community Safety Team Manager in Doncaster Council's Community Safety Team.
Good afternoon, Bill Hotchkiss, Head of Community Safer Stronger with Doncaster Council.
I'm Melanie Palin, I'm Doncaster District Commander for the Police.
Good afternoon, Luke Shepherd, Head of Doncaster Probation Service.
Good afternoon, I've just recently started in post as Community Safety Coordinator. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. So do you want to who's going to introduce the item today?
I'm myself, Chair, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, elected members and Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to come along today and outlining the content of the newly refreshed and developed community safety strategy. The strategy itself is a statutory plan which requires endorsement by the Council. It's produced and owned by the Safer Stronger Doncaster Partnership, which is a strategic partnership that covers crime and disorder issues in Doncaster. The SSDP, as it's known, has a legal duty to work together to tackle crime and disorder and tackle alcohol and substance misuse and antisocial behaviour. The SSDP has a wider remit to address any other behaviour which has a negative effect on the local environment and to produce a plan how this will be achieved. So the community safety strategy that we're presenting today is an outline of how we're going to address those issues. It's produced every 4 years and refreshed annually, but the plan you see today is a total rewrite of the existing strategy. So it's not a refresh, it's a complete rewrite of the old former strategy. It's been produced following an extensive consultation in respect to the partnership priorities and includes a summary of the key achievements and outcomes we're seeking to achieve with and for the people of Doncaster. The strategy and accompanying delivery plan also gives an overview of how we plan to address our priorities. So members of the Community Environment Scrutiny Panel are asked to comment on and endorse the content of the Community Safety Strategy, which has already been through mechanisms of the Council governance process. In terms of the strategy, we ensure that the priorities remain relevant and responsive to the important issues affecting citizens of the Borough for the next 4 years. The consultation process has been far-reaching, with responses being welcome from residents, elected members, community groups, the Youth Council, key partners and staff and businesses across the borough. We publish communications in a variety of forums, including the council social media platforms, newsletters, chief executive blogs, and voluntary action Doncaster newsletters and Doncaster Talking newspaper. In terms of the content of the strategy, we've identified through cross-cutting referencing the data which has been captured in the Joint Strategic Intelligence Assessment through a robust and comprehensive process of community consultation. So in terms of the consultation, we've identified that the strategic current priorities should remain the same as they continue to meet the needs of residents and partners. But we've also identified a number of emerging issues which are reflected in the strategy and delivery plan. So the strategic priorities reflected within this strategy are tackling domestic and sexual abuse, something we've been along and spoken to the yourselves before about, and we gave a really thorough update about the new domestic abuse strategy, reducing antisocial behaviour, reducing crime and reoffending, tackling serious and organised crime, and reducing substance and alcohol misuse, and importantly, reducing violence and violent crime. So this strategy will result in closer partnership working in respect of these identified priorities. So if I may, Chair, I'd like to present the strategy for any comment and any questions that the group may have.
Perfect, thank you, Bill. So I'll lead the way there. So how effectively will do you believe this policy will support the borough's corporate objectives?
So in terms of the corporate objectives, we're aware that obviously we've got Doncaster Working, Doncaster Living, Doncaster Learning, Doncaster Caring, and being a connected council. So in terms of Doncaster Working, we will ensure that reducing crime, antisocial behaviour and reoffending will help to support the economy and businesses to enable them to flourish and attract new investment in Doncaster. In terms of other important priorities, Doncaster Living, we feel it's important that residents feel safe within communities and a part of vibrant communities. So it's really important that there'll be referencing within several aspects of the strategy about how we're going to achieve that. In terms of Doncaster Learning, working with colleagues in education, working with the Youth Council and children and young people who are actively involved in the Safer, Stronger Doncaster Partnership, that's something that's very important to us. And in terms of Doncaster Caring, improve safeguarding for most vulnerable residents and families. And we used the example earlier of preventing violent crime, tackling domestic and sexual abuse is something that's really important. So in terms of improving safeguarding for victims is really imperative as well. And in terms of connecting the council and connected council, working in partnership is one of the key aspects of the strategy because we do work with a number of key statutory partners. And this ensures that we deliver efficient and effective services through that partnership working and through tackling early intervention and prevention on the priorities that we're putting forward. So I think there's obviously a lot more that we can say as well, but throughout the entire strategy, you will see that it does interconnect, it does support a lot of the other borough strategies, and we are very much part of lots of other boards within Doncaster, the Safeguarding Children's Board, the Safeguarding Adult Board, Health and Wellbeing Board as well. So we've got connections with those boards, and that's outlined within the strategy, Chair.
Thank you very much, Bill. So the next question is for Councillor Muddy-Monroe.
Hi, what was the level of consultation achieved in this process? What was the feedback and how was it taken into account, including how many people were reached, their ages and geographic localities?
Bill's covered some of this already in the introduction, but I'll just go over again the approach that we took to the consultation initially. So we worked very closely with our policy and change team under their guidance around the consultation approach, bearing in mind that it was under a time of COVID restrictions, so we had to approach it quite differently to how we have done in the past. So we developed a SurveyMonkey, designed a SurveyMonkey survey with our policy and change team under their guidance of the types of questions and the way that those questions were phrased to make sure that we pulled out the answers that that communities wanted to share with us. So we reached out across a range of community and faith sectors through the Safer Stronger Doncaster partnership. The Youth Council were very involved in helping to spread those messages across young people in Doncaster. Worked with elected members with some additional dedicated briefings to that audience, and then our external social media comms and internal comms as well. We actually posted the consultation on the Doncaster Talks platform, and with support from our comms team as well to keep those messages running through the month that the consultation was out. In terms of reaching a broader audience, we were very conscious that because of the COVID restrictions, we couldn't go out face to face as we have done in the past. So our comms focused on alternative methods of people being able to contact us and get their points of view across. So we offered audio and braille versions of the questionnaire, the Doncaster Talking newspaper as well. I did actually speak to a few residents as a result of the Talking newspaper, where we would manually fill in their responses if they were unable to access that online. In terms of geographical and age, I've got that data here. So of the respondents, the majority were in the 45 to 64 age group. The second highest was the 25 to 44. So we had most respondents from 25 to 64 in that larger bracket. And postcode, we asked residents for the first 3 digits of their postcode as part of the survey. The highest responses were in DN3, DN5 and DN4, with decent representation across DN1 and DN2 as well. So quite a number around the town centre and into Balby and Wheatley areas as well. In terms of how the feedback was incorporated into the strategy, as Bill's already said, the overall priorities, the top level strategic priorities have remained the same, but they are all encompassing. So the detail underneath that is where we've focused in the strategy around the delivery plans for each theme. So we've meticulously gone through the feedback, picked out the common themes, which possibly isn't surprising, focused around things like antisocial behaviour, around visibility of resources, around access to reporting and feedback. So a lot of the narrative throughout the strategy is focused around how we improve that experience for residents, for victims of crime, how we work together with our localities colleagues to maximise our visibility on the ground, and how we use that information to better understand what it is that those communities are needing and wanting in their locality areas. So I hope that starts to answer your question.
Just a follow-up, do you think the consultation was representative of the whole borough?
I think under the circumstances we had, we did as much as we possibly could to reach as many people as we could, and we were pleased, if that's the right word, of some of the cross-sections of responses we did get. As I said before, we weren't able to approach it in the same way due to COVID. Under normal circumstances, we would have reached out, done lots of face-to-face workshops and all sorts of different other focus groups that weren't possible, but we tried to counteract that and offset that a little bit in the other alternative versions and approaches we tried. I think there's always room for improvement with anything like this. I think anybody who undertakes consultation would acknowledge that. And whether we look at revisiting some of that consultation as we do these refreshes throughout the 4-year period, that might also be an option if COVID restrictions allow a little bit of a greater engagement than we could the first time round.
Thank you very much. So the next question is from Councillor Stapleton.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. On page 12 of the strategy, the impact of homelessness and aggressive begging is a large influence in the town centre and not feeling safe for residents. How will this be combated, and how will this be different from the current situation?
Thank you, Councillor. Very good question. I think anybody who visits not just Doncaster town centre, but equally, the Mexborough and Thorn towns as well, start to see the impact of homelessness and aggressive begging as well, which contributes to people feeling unsafe. It's something that we're very acutely aware of, and we've been aware of it for quite a long time. And in terms of the strategy for dealing with it. In Doncaster, we've got, thankfully, an integrated approach to tackling homelessness. We have the Complex Lives team, who are a trained group of individuals who engage with various partners, people that may be homeless, presenting themselves either in the town centre or indeed in this building at the Civic Office. And it's really about trying to get them the support that they need, because by the title of Complex, there'll be a number of needs. It may be mental health, it may be substance and alcohol misuse, it may be other issues that individual's got. So we very much try and engage with those individuals and then support them into accommodation. Sometimes that works, and sometimes it takes several attempts until eventually we do get people in a more stable position to give them the help and support that they need. In terms of individuals that are behaving aggressively, we obviously look at trying to put visible resources into the town centres. So we've got our community ambassadors, we've got police officers, and we've got other partners as well, the neighbourhood response team. And where we see people stepping over the line and behaving in a criminal way, or in a way that's going to intimidate members of the public, or it could be antisocial behaviour, then obviously we'll use the tools and powers that are available to us to enforce that. So it may well be using legislation, or it might be the public space protection order that's in existence in Doncaster Town Centre, and that gives us particular powers to deal with people drinking alcohol and in a public place, etc. But collectively, it's very much a partnership approach. I wish I could say that it's a very quick fix, but I don't think it is. I think it's something that's going to be more longer term. It's going to take time to resolve. But from my engagement with the partners, I can see that everybody's very committed and working in an integrated way. And when I speak to colleagues in other parts of South Yorkshire in particular, everybody is wrestling with similar issues in terms of their city centres and town centres. I think the advantage that Doncaster's got is that we have an integrated approach, and we've had an integrated approach for some time. Pat Hagan, who's part of the council, is very much been a part of that. But as I say, it's something that's going to take a long time. It's a long-term strategy. But from our perspective, what the strategy does say is that we'll continue to work together, and if people do step over that line and are behaving inappropriately, then it's really important that we take action through the tools and powers that are available to us.
I would just like to come back with a fairly straightforward question, really, that I think requires just a yes or no answer. From a local authority perspective and from the police, do you have the resources you need?
I think it's fair to say that there's always more can be done if you've got more resources. And I think it's also fair to say that on a daily basis, the balancing of resources across the borough presents challenges in relation to tackling all the issues across the borough, and you'll be aware of some of the challenges we have not only in the town centre but also in some of the outlying villages. So if your question is, would I want more resources? The answer is always yes. And I think that just answers your question, really.
And certainly from a local authority perspective, I would say that everybody would say that we would like more, because I think with more resources, we're able to do more. We're able to cover more areas, probably in a more longer term way as well. But I think one thing from my observation of the issue is I think that Doncaster Council was very forward thinking several years ago when this issue first started to emerge. And I think we were probably ahead of the game from a lot of other councils in terms of putting those resources in place. So the Complex Lives team and the work that Pat Hagan's been doing with lots of other partners, it's not just Pat, although he is very visible in the town centre, it's a lot of other partners, and a lot of people have put a lot of hard work and effort into it and have shown a great deal of patience with some very, very demanding individuals, and there has been some success stories as well. But as I said earlier, if we had more resources, then no doubt we could do more, and I'm sure we'd say that on a lot of subjects.
So can I just add something to that? I think that there is a perception that we kind of wrest our way out of some of the challenges presented in the town centre. But as Bill's alluded to, some of these are complex issues that need that partnership approach with the Complex Lives team to address not only what is seen on the face of it with some of the aggressive begging, use of alcohol and drugs, but also some of the complex needs that some of these individuals have got.
Thank you, Mel. Just a quick follow-up from myself. As a ward member in particular, I noticed that when we have our meetings with our community support officers, they mention how the people who are often begging in intake, which is where we represent, they're actually homed people. They're not actually homeless. They're essentially doing it as a side income, which you can kind of understand, because if you do, say you get £1 every 5 minutes, that's £12 an hour. That's a good wage to anyone, really, and it's tax-free. It's almost become a job for a lot of residents. So I'm a little concerned that your answer was mostly around, obviously it mentions homelessness and aggressive begging, but there's the concern around residents who are homed, and what we're going to do about, well, how we can get them into employment, essentially, how we can get them away from still aggressively begging and defeat that perception of homeless. I say, as far as I'm aware, any time I've ever seen someone who's been suspected as homeless, a quick call to the hotline in the council, and generally in about 2 hours they'll send someone out to the person and ask them if they need any support. I say it's the people who aren't actually homeless but are still begging. That's the concern I think most residents have, is they're not sure what to do in that situation.
Yeah, I think if you speak to the individuals and the teams that deal with the homeless individuals on a daily basis, many would support the view that you've just given there about the fact that we know that the people that are there begging have got accommodation. It may not be a permanent home, but it's accommodation. However, there are genuine cases out there as well. And I think what we do with our strategy is make sure that somebody who is genuinely homeless, then the support is there for them. I think that's really key. But equally so, I think there's also education for the wider public to say that there are other means of supporting these individuals rather than giving people money and encouraging the issue. And that's something that Pat's been very keen to do with the Just Giving campaign, so that it outlines to the public there are actually alternatives of supporting individuals rather than just handing over money, because the outlook is that you don't know where that money's going. It could be going to buy alcohol, buy drugs, and it may not be particularly helping that individual. So part of the education programme is around alternative means of giving and giving support, and that's something we've been very keen to do and will continue to push.
Thank you, Bill. So the next question is from Councillor Cobby.
On page 13, 33% of people did not report crimes due to long 101 rating times, previous negative experience and lack of confidence anything will be done. How can Community Safety Partnership better promote the reporting of crimes which are valuable in mapping priority locations in the borough?
So this is a subject that we discussed long and hard when we were writing the strategy, especially taking into consideration that it was one of the key issues that came out of the consultation, and not just in the consultation, but when we get complaints from our communities, it's often reflects the opinion that's been mentioned here. In relation to 101 and the way in which we manage reports of crime, the police are really keen to develop other ways of reporting crime. So you can now report online. You can now have you can elect for a call back from the police if the wait time is of a certain time. And we're also looking at, probably not in the near future, but in the more medium to long-term future, about what are the opportunities around social media and if there are opportunities to report crime in that way. That's not to say that we aren't focusing on the 101 service and understanding that waiting times are often more than we would like them to be. Though when we do speak to communities, the perception that communities have about the wait times for 101 is often quite significantly higher than what is the reality. And I think sometimes there's conversations that are about perception of what 101 really is, as opposed to actually the reality of it. And what you'll see in the community safety strategy is a reference on a number of occasions to a rapid improvement plan. And that's actually a commitment from ourselves and the wider partnership, including the local authority, to look at opportunities for improving not only how we handle calls from members of the public, but how we respond and record those calls. And not just that, it's also about how we provide feedback to callers and the wider community in relation to the action that's been done. And we've talked quite extensively about looking at our engagement / consultation / communication strategy to really be clear with communities about what the response to certain incidents is. Because it might not be that an immediate response is given to a call immediately, but actually, when you look at the broader response across the community, a more longer term solution is looked at through the localities model, which addresses some of these issues. And we don't think we're always that good at explaining to the community what the work is that's being done within those communities.
Brilliant, thank you. So next question's for Councillor Cobby again.
Okay, so following on from that point, so is there a centralised system in Doncaster where all crimes are collated so that hotspots can be identified for increased resources? Yep. So following on from the point there before, is there a centralised system in Doncaster where all crimes are collated so that hotspots can be identified for increased resources?
In terms of centralised system, we rely heavily upon the data that is reported to the police. So we have the data around crimes and antisocial behaviours, which the police will record, and that's shared with us. But equally so, we're looking at developing a more sophisticated way of gathering data through the new local solutions and localities model that's now being rolled out. So you may be aware that the council has its own systems, a system called Lagan, where if a member of the public rings and reports antisocial behaviour, we can record that, and that is shared and overlaid with the police data to give us a more accurate reflection of what's happening in our local communities. So the important thing for us is that that data is shared on a local level, so the key partners that work in the small communities, the villages, or indeed the town centres, have a good idea about what's being reported. But obviously, what we need to understand, and Mel's touched on this in the earlier response, is that there is a degree of underreporting. We understand that. People aren't reporting everything. They may not pick up the phone every single time. So what we need to do is ensure we've got that information from as many sources as we possibly can to give us that full picture about what's happening on the ground. Some of that we can see ourselves when our resources are out on patrol or visiting members of the public. You can see key issues, and you can see issues in our estates, in our communities. So we're picking up all that local intelligence and data and taking it into our local solutions meetings. And at those meetings, we sit down as a partnership and talk about how we can respond to these issues from the point of view of early intervention and prevention before things get any worse. So in terms of a centralised system, the police have got a centralised system where they share data, and that's shared with us on a local level. We do have a database to record reports, but going forward, I think as a localities model starts to roll out, we will get better and better at collating that information in a more centralised system, if that answers the question.
Thank you very much, Bill. So my next question is from Councillor Kent.
Thank you. Can we have a brief overview of the Integrated Offender Management Service and the role they play in tackling prolific offenders?
Yeah, so the Integrated Offender Management Scheme, it's a partnership approach to address offending and offenders with both a strong focus on rehabilitation and addressing some of the complex needs that we've already talked about this afternoon, but also the use of swift consequences, both within the probation service via recall and breach, but also with our police colleagues, to ensure that offenders get both a carrot and a stick approach to support them moving forward. It's actually just gone through a national strategic review, and this has created a 3-cohort model of fixed, flex and free individuals that the probation service and the police jointly target as the most prolific offenders. To give you an example, the fixed cohort includes those convicted of certain neighbourhood crimes and receive certain scores on probation and police systems. The flexible cohort is a priority cohort of persistent offenders that we will be targeting, mainly linked to what we call high frequency shoplifters and cause a lot of the intercent crime. And then our free cohort will be one that we want to focus on around domestic abuse and violence, linking in with the community safety strategy, but also looking at transition cases from the youth offending service into the adult offending world. So the key partners involved are both the police and probation, but also we very much have a strong link with the substance misuse service and offender health services, and we're co-locating, or will be when COVID comes to the end, down at the probation office on Bennettthorpe Road, so that we can get that maximum information sharing and joint approach to supporting these individuals. They're managed through what we call MAC meetings, multi-agency case conferences, where individuals are discussed, but crucially, interagency plans are developed to put the interventions in place to support them, or obviously deal with their enforcement.
Thank you very much, Luke. So the next one's for Councillor Cobby again, please.
What is the strategy for the prevention of gender-based violence, particularly in the rise of spike in both injections and in drinks in the town centre?
Tackling gender-based violence is a very important issue. It's a very current theme at the moment and very important to the Safer, Stronger Doncaster Partnership and all partners. Tackling violence in every form is something that's a key priority. However, violence against women and girls is very much a new and developing agenda which we are responding to. We are having discussions at the moment about the best way to tackle and respond to it, and some of the discussions are around having a dedicated theme group to that issue around tackling violence in general, but including violence against women and girls. And some of the concerns around the spiking of drinks and, you know, where we've seen in some places people being injected as well in public houses and licensed premises. So part of our approach is going to be around education to ensure that staff that work in licensed premises are trained to spot the signs. We've also received some funding from the Violence Reduction Unit, which is based in Sheffield, for some kits that would help to prevent the spiking of drinks, so some physical things that can be fitted on bottles and some test kits and things like that. The new nighttime economy theme group has just been started in Doncaster. That's jointly chaired by one of our directors, Dan Swain, and Police Superintendent Neil Thomas. And that group is very much going to be working with the licensees and the staff that work in licensees and the staff that work in nighttime economies. So the key partners, raising awareness and training staff in premises. So individuals such as the street pastors to spot the signs, because when you see somebody who's had a lot to drink, it can be very similar to somebody who's had the drink spike. So it's recognising those signs, making sure those individuals get the attention and support, the medical attention that they need. That's really important as well. And also training licensed staff to look out for those individuals and those signs that may exist. And I think what's also important as well is that any cases that are identified, we start to map them, so we're very much aware of them. And going back to the point I made about violence against women and girls, it's about feeling safe in areas where individuals may feel as though, you know, there's some intimidation there or there's some worry. So some of the schemes we're operating at the moment in Doncaster is identifying locations where we can improve lighting. It could be in public parks, for example, where we may be able to install CCTV in some places, which again contributes to that feeling of safety. It's not the answer to everything, I do understand that, but certainly identifying those areas where those concerns exist the most. So we're linking in with some of the area managers to identify those areas where members of the public, particularly women and girls, may feel unsafe. So we're doing a mapping exercise of that. And then when any funding becomes available, we can then do specific projects in these locations. And I think, I'm sure that as we move on with this agenda, there is no doubt at all in my mind that we will need to start developing a strategy to pull all this information together, and part of that will be an action plan, so there is some key actions there. And when I speak to colleagues in other parts of South Yorkshire, Barnsley, Sheffield and Rotherham, we are sharing information and sharing ideas, and obviously looking at what's coming out from the government, because lots of things are coming out from the government around this agenda. And obviously we need to be focused on that in terms of Doncaster and our approach to it. So it is very much a current issue. I can reassure you that we are looking at this moment in time, and at the last Safer Stronger Doncaster Partnership meeting, Mel, we had a long discussion about this, about how we're going to be taking this forward. And I've no doubt we'll be able to report in the future back to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee in terms of our progress. So thank you for that question. It's a very good one.
Thank you very much, Bill. So the next question is from Councillor Stapleton again, please.
Thank you. Again, trying to stay up to date. How supportive is the strategy with regarding to protecting vulnerable people and groups, particularly with refugees who are joining Doncaster communities? And for clarity, I'm talking about the protection of the refugees, not protection of vulnerable groups from refugees. If that makes sense. Yeah.
In terms of asylum seekers and refugees that are coming into Doncaster, our ethos is that we will provide that support to make Doncaster a very welcoming place for communities. Rachel and I sit on an asylum seeker support group where we work with some of the main partners in Doncaster. The Conversation Club, for example, who do fantastic work across Doncaster with refugees and asylum seekers. We have dedicated roles within the council to provide that support. And we also work with some of the key providers, such as Misuse, Migration Yorkshire, and the Refugee Council as well. And we have regular meetings with those agencies just to ensure that we are addressing all the issues that are coming up. And we also think very carefully about particular locations that may not be suitable for people to be placed. So they're very much engaged with the local authority in terms of identifying those areas. It may be a particular street or a particular address that may not be suitable, because clearly we have access to information that they don't, and they very much listen to us about that. So we do have an integrated approach. We have regular meetings with key partners, and as I say, from Doncaster's perspective, we want to make it a safe and secure environment and community, and very much a welcoming community for refugees and asylum seekers within Doncaster.
Thank you. Very good answer, thank you.
Thank you. Next question is from me. So can you provide a brief overview of the clear, hold and build strategy mentioned on page 23?
Yeah, I'm sorry it's me again, but clear, hold and build is one of the agendas that I actually manage, tackling serious and organised crime. I chair the theme group, which is made up of the key partners in Doncaster. Clear, hold and build is a new approach to tackling serious and organised crime. It's an initiative that came out from the Home Office, and Doncaster, we engaged with the Home Office and put ourselves forward to use the principles of clear, hold and build to tackle some of the issues in our communities. It's very much useful for those communities where organised crime groups have become embedded in the community. So where you have a particular group that is quite extensive and covers, shall we say, several streets and several areas and has a big impact in that area, Clear, Hold and Build is a structured and integrated approach to tackling those issues. Some of it isn't rocket science, if I'm honest, and some of it is things that we're already doing. But what Clear, Hold and Build does is give you a short-term, a medium-term and a longer-term structure. So Clear is very much about the enforcement approach. And I have to say, looking at police colleagues, it's very much police-led. So it's about tackling the issues head-on in terms of things like using legislation, gang injunctions against particular individuals. It might be execution of search warrants. It might be key arrests, etc., and taking money off individuals that have made money from organised crime. So once we've got the Clear approach well established and there's been a degree of stabilisation, the hold and build is very much about the partnership coming in. And the partnership coming in, working with communities, working with key stakeholders in that communities to send that message that actually organised crime has no part in our community. So it's about improving the confidence of that community and using any available funding that we might be able to secure as well. The Safer Streets funding is a good example of that, and using that for key projects in the community. We have some work being undertaken at the moment using funding from Safer Streets funding in the Mexborough area, and that is very much about developing local networks with the community, target hardening properties, rolling out forensic marking schemes such as smart water, installing CCTV to provide reassurance to that community, and also working with local schools as well in terms of ensuring that young people are not being drawn into organised crime. So the example I've given is really around the clear stages about very much police-led, going in there and sending a message that, you know, this is not going to be tolerated, this is the approach we're going to get. And the hold and build, which is currently ongoing at the moment, is around building the confidence in that community and that longer term investment. So it's very much about returning to that degree of normality so that we take away that foothold in communities that the organised crime groups are trying to secure. So that is my best explanation I can give of clear hold and build.
Thank you, Bill. So the next question is going to come from Councillor Church.
Under reducing substance and alcohol misuse section, all of the priorities seem to be based around recovery. With the previous success and achievements of preventing misuse, we hope the concentration on recovery won't take recourses from maintaining prevention.
I'll give Bill's voice a rest and I'll take this one. We've got an answer from Helen Conroy, who is the chair for the substance misuse theme group. So I'm going to read out what she said, but it comes with an offer from Helen that if this doesn't cover what you're wanting to know, she's more than happy to have a conversation outside of the room. I'm not going to profess to understand what's said here, but I will read it out. So what Helen said is, there is a focus on a strong recovery community, which is complementary and part of maintaining prevention. So there are people with lived experience to provide strong role models. There is also a spectrum with a suite of services through from prevention, harm reduction and recovery that cater for the different needs of people on treatment journeys for individuals, families and communities. So I think what Helen's saying there is that a recovery focus is an important and complementary part of maintaining the prevention. So it isn't a case of one is at the expense of the other. They very much work together because that treatment service needs to cater for a whole range of complex needs and services. So the answer was very much that it won't be at the expense of, one won't be at the expense of the other. But as I say, if you want more information, Helen would be more than happy to pick that conversation up further.
Thank you very much. It was recently discussed at OMSC as well, where we had people from Aspire come in, which is the recovery charity. So if you want minutes from that, I'm sure we'd be more than happy to get you them too. It's great news though. So next one's for Councillor Grace.
Hi there. Right. When you've got the item violence and violent crime, what percentage of it is the byproduct of everything that you've covered? Because why is it a standalone item, or is it a byproduct of the others?
I don't know what you mean by a byproduct.
Right, well, you've got violent crime. Is
Yeah.
it just random isolated incidents we're talking about there? Or is the violent crime, what you're talking about here, from a product of domestic abuse, from alcohol misuse, that sort of thing? Is it separate to them issues?
In relation to violent crime, it's something we've discussed extensively within the group, because as you've just identified, it sits alongside many of these other priorities.
Right.
And historically, we had a violent crime reduction group, and actually we removed that group because we felt that it was a cross-cutting theme across all of the groups. So basically what was happening is the violent crime group were just ending up re-talking about all of the other aspects of the strategy. With the violence against women and girls theme, we are now saying that actually, in order to bring some focus to that theme and the broader violence which isn't covered, that actually we want to look to reintroduce that theme group to cover some of those areas. Now, in relation to is violence a product of some of the other areas, actually, the main area in which we see that sits outside of some of the things we've talked about is the violence associated with the nighttime economy, which you rightly say is linked to alcohol and substance misuse. But the violence in the nighttime economy, when we talk about alcohol and substance misuse, might not necessarily be the type of people who are engaging in support around what we would consider misuse. These are people in the nighttime economy who commit acts of violence or where violence occurs. So you're right, it's a really complex arena, and violent crime goes all the way from threats where there's no actual physical violence all the way up to murder and manslaughter, so it's quite wide and encompassing. And it's interesting that you raise a complexity that we've actually battled with probably for the last 12 to 18 months in relation to how do we address this. So I know that probably doesn't fully answer your question, but it's really difficult to, I mean, obviously with data we can strip out what is domestic abuse. It's quite challenging to isolate alcohol and substance misuse that leads to violence, but we can take out some of, like I said, the domestic abuse, which is a really specific type of violence which is tackled in a specific way, and as you can imagine is very different from violence coming out of the nighttime economy, or in fact the higher levels of violence that we often see in relation to organised criminality. So I don't feel like I've answered your question, but it's interesting you raise a question that we've been discussing for 12 to 18 months.
Just give me more understanding. What concerns me, on the items that, like you say, are the one-off, should we say, in the nighttime economy, and what you addressed was that with the ladies with syringes and like looking after them, but I didn't hear anything about preventing it to happen in the first place. That has concerned me.
You're absolutely right. I mean, when Mel said it's a cross-cutting theme, reducing violence, that's absolutely correct. If you look at all the theme groups, the substance misuse theme group, the reducing reoffending and crime theme group, violent crime is sometimes a byproduct of that. You know, it may be to commit a crime, it may be as part of domestic abuse, sexual abuse, there's a threat made. And you're absolutely right. The work of those theme groups is very much about interventions, preventative methods. So it's about stopping it happening in the first place. So the nighttime economy group that we talked about earlier for the town centre, as Mel said, one of the hotspots for violent crime, which is no surprise because when you mix alcohol and other things in a town centre, sometimes violence is a byproduct of that, unfortunately. So actually doing what we can to prevent things happening, putting officers out on the street to intervene early, making sure that door staff are properly trained, making sure that licensees don't serve people that's already had enough to drink, and also intervening early where we've got hotspots. CCTV monitoring hotspots as well, so sending resources to what we see as a developing situation. Everything really, really important. And I couldn't emphasise enough that those theme groups, it is all about early intervention and prevention. Whatever it may be, the reports that we bring to SSDP as a theme group chair is about stopping things happening or even raising awareness to make people more aware of it. And that's a key issue of domestic abuse, as you know we spoke about before. Raising awareness so that people can spot the signs, so that we can give people help when it's required, or indeed perpetrator programmes addressing people's behaviour. Again, that's a really, really important feature of everything we do, because that's what the community safety strategy is about. Not just, you know, dealing with the effects of it, but trying to prevent it in the first place, because actually that means we've got more resources then to go out there and tackle all the issues. So I do understand where you're coming from there, totally.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Can I just add as well, in Doncaster we have a representative who sits on the violence reduction unit, which is a a county-wide structure which looks at actually what do these interventions look like from a broader point of view, but also what that does is it brings learning not just from other areas of the county, but also from a national structure as to how we tackle some of these areas of violence. Because as you can imagine, and like Bill said, tackling, for example, organised crime group violence, which is often used to reinforce fear, is very different from tackling domestic abuse or even the nighttime economy.
Thank you. One strong theme that seems to be coming at the moment is there's not much emphasis in this strategy for prevention overall compared to what... you just gave brilliant examples there, Bill and Mel, of prevention activities that are taking place, but in the strategy itself there's not actually that much emphasis on prevention. It's mostly about more towards enforcement. So it'd be good to look at the strategy and possibly put in more information about what would be done about prevention. I say we had that earlier question regarding alcohol misuse and recovery versus prevention. I say it's mostly based on recovery, and I say as Councillor Grace just brought up, then it's a similar situation there where it was mostly based around how to enforce it as opposed to how to prevent it. So it'd be good to see I'm sure the committee would agree there. That'd be good to see that come back. Councillor Cobby, did you want to?
Yeah, as well, particularly on the town centre, I chaired the hospitality forum, and it'd be good to have regular police attending those forums as well to liaise with the hospitalities as well, because that's one thing that I know the businesses have struggled with is getting that regular liaison. So we do welcome them attending future meetings as well to be part of that strategy of prevention.
Thanks. So yeah, I'll just leave that thought with you. So we've got a Councillor Smith next.
Hello. How does the strategy support those children and young people not engaged in education due to exclusions?
Young people not being in education and children not being in education would be a concern to me, because there may be a variety of reasons as to why that's the case. The way that it will be tackled as part of the strategy is very much on a local level. We have the localities model and a local approach to that. So where teams of people are out in communities and identify particular individuals that may, not all children do this, but sometimes when they're not at school, they may do things and start engaging in antisocial behaviour, for example, or other issues in the community. And when they come to our attention, then our approach is very much around engagement, finding out why they're there, why they're not in school, engaging with the school and local partners, engaging with the school exclusion officers as well to find out what the background is to that. And very much it's about a partnership, working together to try and get those kids back into education or back into some form of education, because clearly whilst they're not in school, that leaves them highly vulnerable to other issues, highly vulnerable. So if we do come across those cases where they've actually stepped over and may be in danger, for example, of being exploited, the Children's Trust and the EPIC team, which you may have heard reference to, the EPIC team, they work very closely with these cases to again steer young people away from that kind of behaviour and back into, either mainstream school or other supported education. But those conversations will very much take place on a local level. And if they do stray into the territory around criminality or antisocial behaviour, we've got mechanisms again that initially will start to engage and support. So there may be some conversations with parents, for example, through the ABC Plus scheme, to say, why is your son or daughter out at this time of night? What are they doing? Did you know this? Did you know they're part of a group? What can we do to address it? So those conversations will happen. And very much if that behaviour escalates, there are other mechanisms that come into fore as well, where we can tackle that. But it isn't about coming in with a sledgehammer to crack a walnut to begin with. It's very much about what's going on here with this young person's life. How can we get them back into education? How can we stabilise things? And sometimes, how can we get them the help that they need as well, which is really important. And that will be reflected in the strategy and the localities approach.
Can I just ask a follow-up? I mean, I'm conscious, having spent the whole of my adult life working with vulnerable people, that if you take school out of children and young people's lives, particularly the most vulnerable, that's probably their only place of safety withdrawn. So they may not be safe at home, they may not be safe in other places. And whilst some of your answers have made me feel somewhat better, I can see from a personal point of view, it's an area that would be of great concern. And the other thing I wanted to ask was, do we know where Doncaster stands nationally in exclusion rates?
In terms of exclusion rates for Doncaster, I don't have that information. It would probably be something that's held by Children and Young People's Service that deal with education and the number of exclusions. But from what you said earlier, I totally agree with you. You know, it would be a concern for me if a child's not in school, and we'd want to know the reasons for that and do everything we can to get them back into some kind of stability, because that's where things start to go wrong. And when I've been on meetings with colleagues in education and partners, what's refreshing for me to hear is there's not this big wish to exclude children from school. There's a lot of steps that take place beforehand, and it's really much seen as a last resort. And for me, that's what it's all about.
Thank you, Bill. I believe it's something that's going to be getting raised with the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee as well, Councillor Smith, so feel free to pop along to that. I think it's December they're going to be speaking about it, so put it in your calendar. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to get some questions from you. So next question is going to be moved over to Councillor Stapleton again. Popular today, aren't you?
Makes a change. It's very evident listening to the hell of a lot of work's gone into this, and you're very committed to the work you've done, and that's brilliant. So I definitely applaud you all for that. But creating strategies, I'm sure you'll agree, is pretty useless unless we actually put in some targets and some performance measures. So in respect to performance measures or KPIs, what is as part of the strategy so we can gauge how effective the strategy is actually being?
No, it's vital that strategies are not just words, it's about the actions that come from that. And in terms of our strategy, the document itself gives you an overview in terms of achievements since the last strategy, what our new priorities are, and then the key thing for me is what we will deliver. Now, the SSDP is made up of a number of theme groups which are referenced within the strategy, and each of those theme groups has a delivery plan. And as part of that delivery plan are measures and performance measures that they're accountable for. So every 2 months when the Safer Stronger Doncaster Partnership meets, Mel is the chair of that meeting, and I can assure you that we are very much held to account as theme group chairs in terms of our performance, in terms of what we're doing to achieve what we said we were going to do in the strategy and how we're delivering it. And we produce a number of performance reports, and on there are what we've done since the last meeting, what our new early intervention and prevention methods are, and importantly, information around the measures and priorities and targets. They are not part of the strategy because, to be honest, it would probably run to another 50 pages if that was the case, because they're quite extensive documents. But I just wanted to give that reassurance that every theme group has terms of reference, every theme group has a delivery plan, and actually at the last meeting, now we've got virtually a new strategy. We've got a couple more hoops to jump through yet to have it properly endorsed. Then what we're going to do is sit down with all those theme group chairs and revise all those delivery plans based upon these priorities and based upon some of the feedback that's come from the consultation. So I just want to give that reassurance. Absolutely right. You know, we need to turn strategies into action. And the way of doing that, or part of the way of doing it, is through the performance measures and targets that are in place.
Okay. You didn't even mention targets for that last little bit. So what I'm trying to get here is there a statistical target we're aiming for, a percentage reduction or something of that ilk that's been identified as a target we want to be aiming for? I'm not saying we have to reach it, but from what I'm seeing in the strategy, there doesn't appear to be anything I get it, we've got strategies in place, we've got plans in place, but I'm sure you can appreciate you can strategise and plan as much as you want. You need to know where you're going. And I'm just wondering, is that something that we should be looking at to create something realistic as well? Because you know, you're never going to get rid of this, no matter what strategies, what funds you've got. It'll never happen. But I think, you know, if we're talking about a 0.5% reduction over 5 years, what's the point? We might as well put monies elsewhere. So what I'm saying is can we actually look at, is there some way of measuring this, the effectiveness of it, with statistics, as opposed to just saying, well, we've got a plan? Does that make sense? Yeah.
I'll answer that. I think when you've got such complex areas of business, it's really difficult to set a target of we're going to reduce this by 10% or we're going to increase this by, so for example, the objectives within the strategy are often, for example, in the domestic abuse strategy, it talks about ensuring that anybody who wants it has support by an IDVA, an independent domestic violence advisor. So some of the targets aren't as simple as just reduce that by that or increase that by that, because as we've identified in the strategy and in some of these areas of business that we've talked about, particularly domestic abuse, sexual abuse, antisocial behaviour, these are things that actually we want to see increase in reporting. So we want to see a reduction in the incidence of it, but we want to see increased confidence in reporting. So it's very difficult to start saying, we want to see a 10% reduction in domestic abuse, for example, but actually we want people to be confident in coming forward and reporting. So often, though it sounds ridiculous when you say it, when we see increases in domestic abuse reporting, and if we were to see increases in antisocial behaviour reporting, which is one of the areas which the consultation said people didn't have confidence in coming forward with, is actually if we set a reduction target, we could end up in a situation where it's counterproductive. So I think, though I agree with you on the face of it, actually we want our assessment of the achievements within those theme groups to be more holistic and a little bit more rounded than having just we're going to reduce it by that, or because actually a lot of this is about supporting vulnerable people and individuals.
Thank you very much. I accept everything you're saying. I mean, for me, it was just looking at this, say, look, you know, let's put some targets in. I understand exactly what you're saying. I'd rather see more reporting happening. But the overarching really is that if we don't have something as a strategy that measures, even if it's just measuring outcomes, without that, how do we ever know how effective it is? So, you know, obviously we're going to do reviews. I'm hoping that at the next time when we're sat here talking about this, there will be something that you can bring to us to say, look, guys, this is how effective this strategy has been. Not just for us, but I think for the general public as well, that they see that everything that everybody's doing is working. So, thank you.
Yeah, and what we were keen to do and like I say, each of these priority areas is underwritten by a strategy in its own right, because we couldn't possibly put everything in here, is actually we've written this strategy differently from last time. So actually there is a clear delivery plan on the back of it, which not only says what we want to achieve from each of those objectives and actions, but actually what the deliverable outcome is we want to achieve. And then when we review this on an annual basis, like Rachel described, is actually what we will do is we will revisit what will we deliver, and hopefully we'll be in a position to say, actually, in response to the strategy, this is what we've delivered. Whereas last time it didn't include anything as specific as that. So actually, like you said, because what I'm keen to do is to demonstrate to our communities what we're actually achieving. Hopefully that will build confidence and trust in the partnership.
If it helps as well, Gary, we are going to be essentially having this meeting again in February, where we're going to be discussing the outcomes of this when it gets into play. But I've got a question from Councillor Grace.
I understand that the complexity of how to measure the targets, but can we not at least have one for the purple flag? How far away that we are from that status, just to give us some sort of milestone?
Yeah, the purple flag status is being developed by the Nighttime Economy Group, and some aspects of that are linked to funding. It would be difficult for me to give you today a date, but what I will do, and assure you, is that I'll speak to the chair, Neil Thomas, and ask what the plans are and whether we can provide you with the date when they're hoping to achieve that purple flag status. Yeah, I can come back with that information. Thanks.
Great. So next question is going to be for Councillor Muddyman-Rollins.
Hi, what are the next steps to delivering the strategy, and what do you think Overview and Scrutiny's role should be within that?
Well, some of the next steps we've spoken about already, because I mentioned that we'd got a number of theme groups, and what we're planning to do is, once the strategy has been published, we're bringing all those theme group chairs together and key partners, and developing a revised delivery plan for each of those theme groups. And I do take note of the points you've made around targets where appropriate. Sometimes things go up, but we know they've gone up for the right reasons. And actually, when things have come down, we know they've come down for the right reasons as well. So those kind of things we can look at in terms of determining those outcomes. And what happens then is each of those theme groups will report back to Safer Stronger Doncaster Partnership Board in terms of progress against the actions that's within the strategy. And mentioned already by Chair that in February next year, we will be coming back to Overview and Scrutiny and providing a report on the delivery of the strategy, and also some information in terms of progress as well. So it may well be that there may be some key elements of the strategy that you particularly want to focus on, and obviously through the team, we're quite happy to provide that information. I know we've already provided updates around domestic abuse. It may well be that, you know, we talked about an agenda today, violence against women and girls. That could be something that maybe we could report on at a future time as well in terms of the progress there. The Nighttime Economy Group, purple flag status, those kind of issues as well, I think are really important. And something that Mel touched upon earlier, which is how we improve the reporting methods for members of the public, because that's been a concern that's been raised. And importantly, providing feedback either to victims, to communities, to elected members like yourselves, that these issues have been tackled. So that could be something that we can report on progress on going forward.
Perfect, thank you very much. I think that's the last of the questions. Anyone got another question? No? Perfect. So we are going to look to endorse the content. One thing I would like to just raise is a couple of points. So, for example, the rapid improvement plan, the integrated office offender management service, and the clear, hold and build. There are a few that have stuck out, but we could do with some form of glossary for this, for terms what quite literally any layperson wouldn't actually understand. So that's just something I would recommend going forward. I know it's very beautifully designed and it might ruin it, but that is something that if we can't understand it as ward members, how a general member of public's going to understand it is beyond the reach. But beyond that, is everyone happy to endorse this strategy? Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. So we will move on to point 7. So that's the Overview and Scrutiny Work Plan 2021 and 2022. I'll just hand it over to Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've already alluded to the fact that the next meeting in February will be acting as the Crime and Disorder Committee, and Bill's already suggested what will be brought to that meeting. There's nothing really apart from that, just to bring the forward plan to your attention so that you can see the key decisions that are going forward. And I've not really got anything else to report on that, Chair.
Fantastic, and thank you everyone for attending. It's the end of the meeting.